It shouldn't come as a surprise to you that I get a lot of machines sent to me for free. I mean, look at all this production value I'm bringing to the scene. However, I think it's important to buy a printer every now and then and go through that new user experience as if I was a regular customer. So today I've purchased this Anycubic Kobra 2, so we're going to open this up and check it out. Alright, and before we get into printing, let's take a look around and look at some of the features on this machine. We've got a filament runout detection switch, a direct drive extruder. It's probably a dual gear direct drive extruder. I'm going to guess it's got an all metal hot end. It's using an inductive probe for automatic bed leveling. And then there's this button at the back, and I couldn't figure out what it does. But I think I know what it does. It's right in line with the bed here. So what I assume is going to happen is it's going to do its automatic bed leveling mesh as normal, but then it's going to go over here and push this button with the nozzle, and that will let it set its Z offset calibration automatically. And it looks like there's a screw in here, and maybe this was pre-calibrated from the factory so that it's perfectly in line here and is able to set up that automatic Z height calibration, which is really cool because that's a somewhat manual step that I think beginners to 3D printing won't be super comfortable with. Then also another interesting thing is we've only got a single Z-axis stepper motor, but we've got dual lead screws. So you can see up here, synchronized with a belt. Then if you go down here, there's no motor down in this little spot. You know, if you're having to use one less stepper motor, that's definitely going to save you some money there. The belt tension seems good. Maybe it's a little tight, but there's a simple way to adjust that. Right here, I can loosen that up if I feel like the belt tension is too tight. And then on the X-axis, I also have an easy adjustment point right here. Seems about right though, so I'm not going to mess with it. And then we've got our reverse Bowden tube and our cable management here. This is a 20 or 24 pin cable that's just facilitating all the connections into the hot end here. So it's very similar to what you see on the Ender 3S1 and most other modern 3D printers. Alright, and that's cute. They've got a little logo on the fan here, so that starts spinning around. Another notable feature is they're using metal guide rails for the X and Y axes. So you can see right here, that's going to roll on those metal wheels. I'm not a huge fan of these. They add a little bit of additional vibration. When you have the Delrin V-Groove wheels, it adds a little bit of damping, which helps smooth out your parts. These I find produce a little bit more fine artifacting when you're printing, but it's not the end of the world. There's pros and cons to this system. Like, it'll probably be slightly lower maintenance, but at the same time you might have to deal with a little bit of artifacting showing up in your prints. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty similar feature set to the Ender 3S1, and I really want to see what kind of part cooling solution they've got on here because that's going to make a big difference with your print quality. Also, the spool holder is over here on the left side instead of on top of the machine. I kind of prefer this setup where it's off to the side because when you set it on top of the machine, it's just kind of seems a little bit fragile being up that high. It comes with a PEI sheet, so you won't have to upgrade this bed surface. It comes with something that's pretty nice. And then if we look underneath the machine, we've got several beefy fans spinning right now. This power supply fan is going and it's making quite a bit of noise. But yeah, here's your power supply, here's your main board. This is a plastic injection molded cover. Same with this piece up top. This is all plastic injection molded. And then you can also see the power supply kind of sticking out the back here, this aluminum. That's just the power supply, so oof. I hate dropping spools. But anyways, here's your power supply. There's a bunch of just like random brackets and stuff holding this together. Holding the power supply to the frame, but it works, so I'm not going to complain. So yeah, let's see how this bed leveling procedure goes. I think it should be pretty interesting, so let's get it fired up. One thing I'm noticing up top here is the belt tension on this little part is pretty loose. Like this is loose enough that it might actually, yeah, it can skip steps there on these timing belts. So this needs to be tensioned somehow. I'm not sure how I would tension this system. I think I'd have to loosen up these two screws and kind of force these to be a little bit further apart. So, kind of funny. So I'm not a big fan of that. Like if I hold this stepper motor still, and then I try rotating this back and forth, I've got a good like 10 degrees of rotation that I can move this other wheel about. It's probably better than nothing, but really they need to tune this up and get these belts to be a little bit tighter. So let's try moving this up to the top again. They need to calibrate the spacing there a little bit better. Maybe have some kind of tensioning mechanism where you can move this whole Z assembly to the left a little bit to put tension on this belt. But it should be good enough, and I doubt we'll see any real issues here in terms of the print quality. Also, another indicator that I use to gauge overall build quality is how tight the V-groove wheels are. Right here, this wheel is pretty much completely loose. I can just spin this around, so the tension wasn't set correctly. Interestingly enough, they have a slot here instead of just a regular hole, and that'll allow you to clock these little carriages on the side so that you can get even tension on all those wheels. So if I wanted to, I could go through and get these wheels set up perfectly, and they have adjustments built in to facilitate that. But for now, I'm just going to run the thing. I mean, I'm not planning on keeping this. I'll be returning it to Amazon when I'm done with this review. But I figured let's just take a closer look at these things and kind of get an idea of how it could be improved. All right, and up top we have a couple threaded inserts here. Here's these little brass threaded inserts. I'm not sure what you're supposed to attach up there. Maybe they originally had the spool holder being able to be installed up top like this, but I think having it off to the side is just fine. I mean, sure, it takes up a little bit more desk space, but it's a more robust solution overall. All right, so without further ado, let's fire this thing up and see what we can do with it. I'm going to turn my lights down a little bit so you can see the screen a little better. And we're going to go through and do prepare, leveling, auto leveling. So the probing will start, press confirm to continue. There's no confirm button, I can press OK to continue though. If you look underneath the bed, you can see there's no bed leveling knobs or anything. So this is one of those machines that you can just get and start printing with it and not have to worry about doing the bed leveling yourself. You should be doing automatic bed leveling, which is a super nice feature, and it's really convenient for people who are beginners and also people who are really familiar with 3D printing, such as myself. Not having to do that bed leveling manually on all my machines is a real time saver and a super convenient feature. So we'll let this printer do its thing. I'm just going to leave it alone and we'll see what comes out. Right now the bed's heating up and I can smell a mild burnt plastic smell. That's pretty typical of the first couple of times you power up one of these machines. The adhesives in that magnetic sticker pad, that's really similar to what you use on like refrigerator magnets. That adhesive kind of off-gasses a little bit when you first fire these machines up. So a little bit smelly, but not that big of a deal. I'm just going to turn my vent fan on and call it good. So other than the power supply and motherboard fan... Oh, never mind. I was going to say this is a pretty quiet machine, but that's clearly not what it was going for. With this part cooling fan on, this machine's quite loud. That's quite a noisy fan. It's probably moving a ton of air, but pretty noisy. Maybe if you installed like a little muffler up front here, get something like this to quiet it down. But it's probably getting excellent airflow and good part cooling, so that's the price you have to pay for that, just a little bit of added noise. It comes with a little USB-A to micro SD and SD card reader, but there's no SD card installed on this machine, so I'm not sure how I'm supposed to get some prints started. Alright, and it's purging out some white filament, so that lets you know that they were doing some kind of quality control testing before I received this machine. And this is one that I bought anonymously, so you can expect that on your machines probably. The machine is quite loud, especially when it's moving that Y-axis rapidly. And this fan is quite loud as well. This isn't going to be one of those machines that you have running in your office next to it. This is probably more designed to just be like a fast, cheap machine. So there's a white silicone pad towards the back of the machine that the nozzle is kind of wiping on right now. And I assume that's so that you get that nozzle nice and clean for the next step, which should be the automated Z-probe offset setting. So it just goes down and presses that button. Not sure why it turns the part cooling fan on and off during that procedure. Alright, now it's going through and using that inductive probe to create a bed leveling mesh. It's just kind of comical how this fan turns on and off, like it's using the thrust from the fan to pick itself up. Maybe it's they're using a little bit of jet propulsion to move the print head around. But yeah, when you hear that Y-axis moving and it's making that kind of loud, buzzing, screeching noise, that's why I like Delrin wheels generally, because these steel rail type wheels tend to make a bit more noise. We'll do some decibel testing later when we're actually running some prints, and we'll see how loud this machine really is. But for now, I've got to look for an SD card. Actually, never mind, here's the micro SD card that comes with the machine. It was in a separate little plastic baggie, so we'll just plug this in to the port up front. And here you can see the I/O for this machine. We've got a USB-C plug and a micro SD port. So we'll plug this little thing into the micro SD there. Alright, so the homing procedure is done. We'll see how good of a job that automatic Z offset probe did. I think it automatically did the Z offset. It's set to -1.83 here, and I didn't enter that number, so I'm guessing that it did it by itself. Module calibration, forget about that for now. But let's just run a print. So it looks like it's got a lot of G-code on here, and I like to see that. You know, having preloaded tests so you can fire up your printer and get running with it. We'll do this leveling test G-code. Okay, I was a little confused here, but you tap on the thing you want to print, it highlights it in red, and then you press print, and that fires it up. And we'll see how this machine does. This will be the leveling test, so this will be verifying that whatever this probe offset thing is doing in the back of the machine is working. We should get a nice, consistent first layer. Some might even call it a perfect first layer. And, you know, we'll see if the bed leveling is working, basically. The machine's nice and quiet when this part cooling fan isn't on, which is kind of a shame. It might be worth installing a quieter blower fan there, just to get this machine to quiet down a little bit. Oh man, and this thing makes some weird noises when it's moving. Alright, so it doesn't appear to be working out of the box. We'll see what's going on and get some close-ups of this first print layer. Actually, it does look like it's doing a pretty good job. It's just, for the first little bit, it wasn't extruding, which is strange because it did purge in an earlier step of this print. But it does look extremely consistent with what's coming out right now. Alright, so this bed leveling test has been going on for a little while. And again, I'm a little confused why it under extruded right here, because it had just purged the nozzle, but maybe it did like a long retraction before that and it needed a minute to re-prime the nozzle. But in any case, it's working great now. You can see this area appears to be slightly over extruded. This one looks just right over here. That also looks just right. And in the back left corner, again, it looks a little bit over extruded, but these are all like acceptable results. It's not as perfect as I'd like to see, but it's definitely doing a good enough job to get your prints going. So in terms of that experience and just being able to unbox this thing, let it automatically do its thing, and hit the ground running, I think this printer's doing a great job. While it's doing this last little pad over here, I'm going to do a decibel test and see how loud this thing is. So how I do this test here is I just stand an arm's length away from the printer and then see what we've got. 39.5 decibels on average. That's exceptionally quiet, so this is actually a very quiet machine until it turns that part cooling fan on. So if you wanted this machine to run very silently, what I would recommend is to just kind of figure out a new part cooling solution for this and get it to quiet down significantly more than what it is right now. So now we have that part cooling fan set to 100%. We'll do the same test, arm's length away. 53 decibels. So that's a 14 decibel increase just from turning that fan on, which is kind of ridiculous. Just listen to this thing. So yeah, there's definitely some room for improvement with the fan noise on this machine. I'm going to turn that part cooling fan off. That could be a very interesting mod to do on this machine, just to make it quieter. And we're finishing up this first layer test. Let's take a closer look at it. Oh wow. Oh wow. And you can hear when this thing speeds up and it's printing faster, it definitely makes some more noise. Oh man, this is kind of goofy. And this is why I don't like it when companies use cheap injection molded bases for their machines, because it just adds a bunch of extra noise. There's a bunch of additional resonances, and basically you get this sound amplification going on, and it makes it kind of loud and obnoxious. Especially when they're using metal... Ugh. Alright, so I just increased the belt tension a little bit to try and get rid of some of those resonances. I'm not exactly sure how to get rid of this noise. When I change the belt tension, it seems like it's helping a little bit, but overall it's still kind of loud and obnoxious. While it does this last pad, I'm going to step back and we'll record the sound levels again. Arm's length away. So yeah, peaking up to 58 decibels without the fan even being on. With that fan on, you've got additional sources of noise, so let's just check it out. Looks like 53 to 54 decibels. That's not too bad, in all honesty. Even with the fan speed set to 50%, it's still quite loud. 25%, we'll see if it's any better. 10%? So apparently this fan just decides it's going to be all on or all off. Even if I turn it down to, let's say, 1%. Yeah, it doesn't look like this fan speed controller is doing anything. Unless I turn it all the way off, then the fan completely stops. I'd like to have a little bit of in between there so I can run it a little bit quieter for when I don't need maximum part cooling. But, you know, it's a cheap machine, so what do you expect? And also, it's very fast. This print is definitely showcasing the top speeds that this printer can achieve, which are quite impressive. What would be a little more impressive is if it wasn't making this strange honking noise. But now I can see why they didn't want to put the spool holder on the top of this machine. With how fast this thing is accelerating and moving back and forth, you don't need another low frequency resonance going on with the high mass up top here. So having it off to the side here is probably, you know, somewhat important in order to get this machine printing at these high speeds. I mean, this is as fast as a lot of klipper machines that I've seen. So this thing's really tuned up to print quickly, and I'm not sure if it's got some kind of Marlin-based input shaper or what, but It's going quite fast. Alright, so I've seen enough of this. Let's just stop the print. It just stops instantly. That's kind of funny. Usually when I tell a printer to stop, it like keeps going for a second and then it stops. But this one, it's like right away. Yes, sir. Alright, so let's check out our results here. So these print results leave a little bit to be desired. They're not perfect. If you look in there real close, you'll see the top surface isn't super even. I mean, it's even enough, and if I was just printing this with plain white filament, you probably wouldn't see much issues here. But there's a little bit of gaps between these lines. It's not perfect print quality, but, you know, that's some crazy speed that it was pushing. So let's take these parts off the bed and fire up some other test prints. If you want to cool off your parts rapidly, just take the whole metal piece off and set it on a cool flat surface like this, and it'll suck all of the heat out of that. Then we should be able to break these free somewhat easily. This PEI sheet is quite sticky. Well, that's just going to have a little... I don't like that. I don't know whether to blame the PEI sheet or the filament, but that was quite sticky and hard to remove. Let's put this back on over here, and we'll run a speed Benchy. So here we'll go to print. Ooh, that's not following the speed Benchy rules though. That's a 0.28 millimeter layer height. The official rules call for 0.2 millimeter layer height. So we'll print this Benchy out, which should be done according to the rules, hopefully. Apparently it's a 38-minute Benchy. That's not the fastest thing in the world, but I'm curious to see how it turns out. Alright, well here's our little Benchy. It took 39 minutes to complete. They went a little overkill with the bed adhesion on this plate. Oh man. Alright, so how does it look? Looks pretty good if you ask me. I did have an issue with the bottom layer coming loose. This is more of an issue with silk PLAs. Silk PLAs tend to have pretty bad layer adhesion. But in terms of overall print quality, this looks very good. And 40 minutes is pretty fast too. There's a little bit of visible under extrusion on the sidewalls and on the top of the Benchy. So not the best result technically speaking, and definitely not very strong, especially considering the type of filament that I used. That's what I don't like about silk PLAs. They look amazing, but you know, they're not very strong. But in terms of print quality out of this Anycubic Kobra 2, it looks pretty good. We'll do another test print. This time I'm going to be using some AnchorMake PLA Plus that I have left over from my M5C review. If you haven't seen that video, it's worth a watch. But I'm going to start up another print job. Hopefully this PLA Plus will have better bed adhesion, and we can test out a couple more things. I'll try out this FDM test code. That's probably going to be a good print to like check out the quality of this machine. So we'll see how it does. Alright, so this machine's actually pretty fast. Hopefully you can tell by this video. Oh my, and that's that fan noise. I mean, just listen to this thing. It's a little noisy. But at least it's fast. Okay, I'm going to switch this over to time-lapse and we'll just kind of watch this thing get built real quick here. Alright, so we just finished up our test print here. You can see it printed these nice pointy little spires, and they turned out great, other than a small amount of stringing between them. So that just goes to show you that this printer is capable of some pretty good results. One last thing I want to show you how to fix on this machine before I get into the final thoughts is this top part that I was complaining about earlier, up here. So as I was mentioning before, this belt, it's pretty tight right now, which seems nice, but it can get really loose. And basically the problem is this little piece right here isn't really held in place all that securely. You can see I can kind of bend this back and forth. So if I push it in that way, now the belt's really loose. If I pull it out this way, I can make the belt tight. And sorry for the noise here. I'm reviewing the Cheedy X+3 right now. It's a bit of a noisy little guy, but hopefully you can ignore that noise a little bit. And let me just strum this belt for you so you can see that it's actually pretty tight. Oh, well, it just got loose when I pulled it out that way. Basically, it's an issue where these little top supports can become tipped at an angle, so they need to do something to secure these better so that they can hold the tension in this belt. I can try just tightening these down and see if that helps. They were pretty loose, so that's probably going to do the trick. So if your top belt up here is loose, just kind of pull these out to put some tension on this belt, and then tighten those bolts down. And now if I pull on this, I can get it to slip again, which is not ideal. But it's better than it was, and if you tighten these down a little bit, that'll help it maintain tension on this belt, which should help you get more precise Z-axis movements. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of issues on this entire build. It seems to work just fine out of the box, and it does everything that it promises to do while delivering some excellent print quality. While we're at it, we should take a close look at this test print. Once the PEI sheet has cooled off, it's pretty easy to remove. And looks like these little pillars got left behind. And this one is stuck in there just a little bit. I could probably break it free if I wanted to. So it looks like we have some overhang and bridging here. Right here it looks like this first one is the only one that turned out 100% good, and that was 45 degrees. It's able to print all the way out to that 15-degree overhang, almost horizontal surface, but the print quality isn't pristine. The only one that it's pristine on is this 45-degree angle, and surprisingly it's able to go out significantly beyond that. It's just you've got a little bit of drooping and the surface isn't perfect there. So yeah, you can see this 45-degree angle looks really good, and anything beyond that has a little bit of ropiness to it. Then here's a bridging test. This whole area here was bridged, and it looks pretty good. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's bridged, so what do you want? Then the bed adhesion looks good all the way around. Here's some more bridging. So it printed out these little overhangs and then bridged between them. Then there's these little spires that it built up top. They look quite nice. I mean, there's a tiny bit of stringing, but it's able to produce really small details here. That shows consistency when printing small features. Here's some more bridging tests. They all printed out just fine. Then we'll look at these overhangs one last time, just with this different camera angle, so you can see how they turned out. So pretty good results all around. Great print quality. All of these circular features look really smooth and nice. All these top features look good too. So let's get into my final thoughts about this machine. Alright, so what do I think about the Anycubic Kobra 2? Well, I think it's a really nice printer. It seems like they've taken the Ender 3 design as kind of like a baseline and just improved various aspects of it. They improved the part cooling, they improved the motion system, made it move faster, added automatic bed leveling, a bunch of convenience features, and most notably this little automatic Z offset probe. They're able to automatically set the Z offset so that you don't have to do that manually, which is a really cool thing to do for beginners, because that can be one of the trickier parts of tuning a printer that you get out of the box. Usually you have to take a little piece of paper and just like hold it under there while you make tiny little adjustments to the Z height, and eventually you'll get it right. If you're experienced like me, then you'll get it no problem. But if this is your very first 3D printer, sometimes that can be kind of tricky. So they found a way to automate that. I'm not a huge fan of their implementation here. It looks like this thing was calibrated from the factory to work with this exact print bed, and it's just this button that's off to the side, so it comes and pushes that button, and there's like a little adjustment screw in the back that they tuned that, so it should always work. But the issue with that is if you get a new print surface, like let's say you don't want to use this PEI print surface that they provided, and you replace it with another sheet that's slightly thicker or thinner, then this little button back here is not going to compensate for that. So I don't think it's the best implementation in the world. It gets the job done for the stock machine, but you might have to go in there and still end up having to make some manual adjustments if you do any type of modification, or even if you just get a different bed surface. The print tests turned out really nice. This one I broke apart because I just don't like silk PLAs, and I kind of like crumbling them in my hands sometimes because they're kind of weak, and I just want to show everyone how you shouldn't use silk PLA for any kind of structural parts. You know, you can just tear the stuff apart. But it does a good job of making really pretty prints that are all decorational and stuff. So if you want to make your multicolored dragons that'll just fall apart as soon as someone sits on them, then go for it. They'll look great in this silk rainbow PLA. But in terms of the actual print quality, everything on this turned out really good. It was a 38-minute Benchy, so pretty decent result there. It's nowhere near as fast as what I was able to print on the Elegoo Neptune 4, or one of these CoreXY printers like the Cheedy X Max, like the Cheedy X Plus 3, or the Bambu Lab AMS, or the Bambu Lab P1S, or the Creality K1. It's not in that same league in terms of speed, but it's still relatively fast. It's much faster than like your stock Ender 3. So they basically put enough upgrades in this thing to make it faster and more fun to use. But at the end of the day, it's just like a nicely upgraded Ender 3. It's not a game changer, it's just you know, an incremental upgrade that adds a couple extra features and maybe prints a little bit nicer and faster out of the box. This thing was definitely built to a price point, and I'm not sure if it's the best deal. At its current price of, let's see what I paid for this, $260, so $259.99. That is the same price as the Elegoo Neptune 4, and I would definitely get that printer instead of this one, just because the Neptune 4 comes with klipper, and it's also a nice machine. It might have been a little bit quieter. I enjoyed the build quality of it more. So, I mean, at the end of the day, this printer isn't really a winner. Yeah, that's the problem with these Elegoo machines, is they're coming in at such a good price point with such good build quality and features that it's hard to recommend anything else. I think you would be fine if you got this printer. It's not a bad printer by any stretch of the imagination. It's just not outstanding, and compared to the competition, I think it struggles a little bit. So I'm going to be putting this thing back in the box and returning it to Amazon. I never really was planning on keeping this printer. Maybe if it just completely blew me away with its print speed and quality, then I'd be keeping it. But I really just wanted to get this to check it out because it's one of those contenders in the entry-level bedslinger kind of price point. And I want to be covering more printers like that because not everyone can afford a super fast $1,000 CoreXY printer like what's... If you like these kind of independent reviews where I'm checking out printers that normally manufacturers wouldn't send to me, make sure to support me on Patreon. It really helps out so that I can afford to check stuff out like this. I'm probably not going to make any affiliate sales off of this printer just because, I mean, it's not that exciting. But if you were shopping for some of these and want to check out some alternative printers, I'll leave some in the description below that I think are better than this printer at the same price point, and then a couple recommendations that are more expensive but also pretty good. Okay, well, yeah, underwhelming printer. It's going back in the box. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. A couple other kind of funny things about this printer is that it puts out an extremely massive purge line. Like, this is a ton of filament. It's really thick. Also, after I bought this printer, Elegoo sent me a message. They sent me an email message, and they were like, hey, you know, here's our customer support line. Let us know if you have any trouble. Thanks for being a customer and all that kind of stuff. So they might have slightly better customer service than other brands, for what it's worth. I mean, I can't really evaluate that. but we'll see how this return goes.